I tell people all the time, if we started out in like this rebellion against the empire and its support of its colony Israel and all these things are doing, we've gone past the New Hope stage of it, right? We would destroy the Death Star. We got some of these places to divest, but the empire is not gone. As a matter of fact, we're in the Empire Strikes Back part of this, where they're going to start doxing people, they're going to come after people. I tell individuals all the time, you can't just win a fight by swinging for 5-10 seconds. It's a long fight. Israel's not going to let you win by swinging once or twice. It'll come back, and what it'll do is very simple. It'll connect with certain black celebrities because they need to have Zionism and genocide explained to people in a folksy down south accent, right? Like that's all it takes to convince black folks when most of them know how Israelis really feel about them and feel about Africans. Next, they'll come to Latinos and they'll use the Bible and conservative Christianity to make us think, ay, tenemos que soportar a Israel. And I swear to God, I have given people the business in my community. I mean, people are like, no, pero ¿por qué no soporta a Israel? ¿Pero qué? Disculpa, señora. ¿Tú crees que Cristo estaría satisfecho con esta matanza? Usted es una desgracia, señora, y usted no cree en Cristo, usted cree en su mismo. Usted está rezando a su mismo, no a Cristo, no a Dios. Porque no hay un Dios en el mundo que puede soportar esta porquería, asesinos de niños. And the lady looked at me and she just got quiet. And everybody in the spot looked at her and was like, nosotros no soportamos eso. But they're all Dominican, right? So they are all Catholic. But I say, tell me something. ¿En qué mundo regresa Cristo? ¿En qué mundo? In what world does Christ come back? And look at this. Like, I don't have to believe in it, but I read that book enough to know what you believe in, right? Right. So, do you think on any planet, any rationale, he could come back and say, well, it's because of what happened on right. That's your mind, right?
I'm content to die for my beliefs. So cut off my head and make me a martyr. The people will always remember it. No, they will forget.
Well, I think the problem with people that try to understand Israel and Palestine is that they try to understand it from 1972 or from 2005 or 89 or 67. And the problem is that we have to go way back to the beginning, to the Balfour Declaration, to the creation of Zionism within Europe at that time, where we have to face the facts that anti-Semitism was a rampant thing in Europe. And it also exposes a veritable truth about that scenario, something that a lot of my elder Jewish friends explained to me, and they were very poignant in saying so, that the natural enemy of the Jewish people has never been Middle Eastern people, has never been other Semites. It's always traditionally been, for 2,000 years, insane, imperialistic people from Europe that have consistently genocided, taken advantage, thrown out, persecuted, you know, and that's something that happened through all the Middle Ages, whether we're talking about Germany, France, Spain, and all of their charters, from the Alhambra Decree to the Code Noir. I think that it's important for us to examine these things, because then we start to talk about Britain's role in it. So I think we have to talk about the Balfour Declaration. We have to talk about a series of other things that took place before we can even discuss what's happening now in Palestine. But obviously, it's not a war, you know, it's a massacre. If I stand behind you and I smash you in the head with a bat, we didn't have a fight, my brother. You know what I mean? I assaulted you, I attacked you. And I think that there's severe underreporting about the proportionality of what happens. So, I mean, I think that obviously there's a media bias in the UK and there's a media bias in America over the issue. And I'm sorry that we don't have a more open discussion about it. And I think the problem is because when a lot of people start talking about this, they're accused of anti-Semitism. And I'm gonna say something very honest, that you know what the problem of accusing every single person of who has differences with the the foreign and the domestic policy of Israel of anti-Semitism, the problem with that is that there are anti-Semites out there. There are people who are Holocaust deniers. There are people who are rampantly racist. And if you tell every single person who questions your politics that you're in the same boat with those people, then how do you know your enemies from the people who simply want to get somewhere better in the world? You know, and I think that's unfortunately what's going on right now. I think it's also sad to see that the left is in a complete disarray in the Middle East and in Israel. You know what I mean? So you have right-wing policies and draconian laws that are run rampant to the point where people are talking about genociding Palestinian people. And when we talk about genocide, we don't have to go far back into history to see that being done to the people who are in Israel now. And that's a shame. And I think that without that sort of historical context, where do we go as a people? Where do we go as a human race? You know, because that's a very big issue, not just for them, but it's going to be in the future when people look back at the world and say, how could everyone have simply let this happen? How could people have just been quiet when other human beings were being murdered? And you had these quasi-intellectual excuses that never really add up when you actually put them to the test. So I would just say that before we start talking about what's happening in Gaza and that massacre that's going on now, I advise everybody to look up the history of how it was created. Britain had no more right to give that land to them than I have the right to give away, you know, Essex to Mongolia. You know what I mean? I think that it's just sad that there's no historical perspective to that.
Because we're Jews, it's being done in our name. We have to stand up and yell. It's not anti-Semitism to be against Zionism. On the contrary, we are attacked. Even when I went out in New York, my car tires were slashed, the windows, the mirrors broken, and so forth. But we don't care. We're going out anyway. Wherever there is a large Jewish community, wherever there's a very religious Jewish community, even if it's not large, they will be in opposition to the existence of the Zionist state of Israel because it is antithetical to Judaism. Zionism is a movement that started around 150 years ago. That's just really recently, relatively recently. And it's a movement of people who were totally estranged from the Jewish religion. They were nationalists. They weren't practicing the religion as a whole. And they wanted just a convenient community, a land, a nation that they should feel comfortable and proud of themselves. The Jews never attempted, even though we went through hardships, the Inquisition, the Crusades, and we suffered a lot, but we never attempted to reestablish a Jewish sovereignty, a Jewish nationhood, a Jewish kingdom, because we know it's verboten, it's forbidden, it's just not acceptable according to Judaism to have our own state. Remember, the religion is 3,000 years ago. But 2,000 years ago, we were sent into exile by God. And we have to be loyal citizens in every country we reside. And we're not to attempt to leave exile because it's a godly declared exile. Jews lived with a distinctly different religion than the Muslims, but it was never a problem. In fact, it's more than that. The Muslims took in the Jews by the Inquisition, where they tried to torture Jews to convert to Christianity. It was the Muslim countries that embraced the Jews and took them in, and the Jews were able to flourish. They realized in order to get a lot of massive support from the world, evangelistic Christians, Jews who don't know the Torah, don't know their laws, who don't practice the laws, so they knew they'll go to Palestine and they'll be able to tell everybody, oh, this is the God-given land to the Jewish people. They automatically started breaching and transgressing the laws of the Torah, not to kill and not to steal, not to oppress a people, because they wanted to make their national home in a land that was inhabited by the Palestinian people. Now, right at the beginning, when they said, oh, it's an empty land. And if anybody stood up against them, they said, because you hate the Jews and you're an anti-Semite. They treat us like the worst terrorists in the world. When a boy or girl turns 17, they become a criminal, even if they're not demonstrating, because we refuse to serve in the IDF. They yell at me as a Holocaust denier when my grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. My father escaped Hungary when the Nazis came in. My father was in Auschwitz. Almost the entire families were wiped out. I live and breathe Holocaust. How dare they claim that we're Holocaust deniers? But that's just part of that, the vile Zionism, that they have the power of the most expensive PR and the power of AIPAC that influences, put pressure on politicians to be silent. That is what they're afraid of. The people who stand up and reveal the truth, that Judaism is a beautiful, and we live together with Muslims, and we are thankful to Muslims, and we don't want what's happening to the Palestinians. We cry with the Palestinian suffering. That is what they're afraid of. The world will wake up